The topic for us will be how to invest in the regulation and very interesting environment situation right now. So, okay, this panel will be in English, but for one moment I switch to Polish. Chciałbym przedstawić naszego moderatora naszego panelu. Będzie to Paweł Ławicki, wiceprezes zarządu Chmura Krajowa. So right now, Paweł, floor is yours, and you have almost 1 hour.
Very well. So welcome everyone. We have a panel related to investing in highly unpredictable environments. We'll have a panel discussion. We'll take a strong innovation investment angle in this discussion. And let me maybe start by introducing myself and introducing our panelists. As the colleague mentioned, I'm a VP at Operator Chmury Krajowej, that's a cloud provider. We are a strategic partner of Google, Microsoft. And I'm a strong technology and innovation enthusiast with long background in technology consulting in Poland and in the UK. So I'll try to take this discussion towards innovation and technology investment in pharmaceuticals industry. In our panel today, we have the following guests. So we have Markus Balzer, CEO of Bayer Central Europe, with Bayer for 17 years, Markus, as I've checked on your LinkedIn, in different roles for quite a few years in Poland, but previously in France and in regional leadership in CE from Germany, right? We have Phil Krzyżek, General Manager, CEO of Merck in Poland, with Merck for 5 years, previously Pfizer, AstraZeneca, but also orthopedic startup from the UK. And privately, as I found out, technology enthusiast and gadget fan. Then we have Piotr Fitz, CEO of, up until September, CEO of Biomed Lublin, but now CEO of smaller company Metron Cryoflex, which deals with minimally invasive surgery, and also previously Novartis, Polpharma, and some other businesses, among other things, dealing with consulting for innovation management processes. So quite an interesting topic for us as well today. Then we have Paweł Bierna, CEO of Biots. For the last 4 years, small innovative company focused on pharmaceutical technology, formulas in oncology, dermatology, autoimmune diseases, but also a lecturer and assistant professor at Medical University of Wrocław. And last but not least, we have Tomasz Nemet, CEO and General Manager of Gedeon Richter for 14 years, and well, Gedeon Richter, one of the biggest medicine producers in Poland, so also interesting, very interesting entity in our discussion. So I would say we have a strong and diverse group with both international and local players. We have people with long career in one company, with many roles. We have people who sort of changed businesses. We have people with consulting background, pharmaceutical, pure pharmaceutical, scientific background. But I think the common denominator for all of us is that we have strong interest and vital interest in innovation, in investment, innovation, and technology investment. So just to maybe cover a few organizational points, and then let's jump to discussion. Panel, as you can hear, due to the fact that some of the panelists are non-Polish speakers, is in English. We encourage participants to submit questions on the chat. We'll try to cover them at the end. I sort of pre-agreed the discussion with panelists that we'll try to cover 3 main blocks. First block will talk a bit about pharmaceutical industry situation versus other industries when it comes to innovation and technology investment. Then we'll cover specific examples and areas in our panelists' companies of innovation in pharmaceuticals understood as your core business. So, biotech innovations in producing of medications in clinical trials, etc. And then third block, we'll talk about technology as an enabler. So AI, machine learning, cloud, whatever you think is relevant in your companies. I would encourage also discussion among panelists, right? So we'll take turns. I'll try to sort of navigate the discussion, but especially if you strongly disagree with a point that someone else said just before, please raise your hand. We want to make this discussion as interesting as possible for the panelists and the participants. So let me start with the first block. So general situation of pharmaceuticals industry versus other industries. I have to say, I in my current role, I see many industries. I see things that happen in different places. I see sort of two industries as specific examples that are maybe on two different sort of sides of the extreme. So I see banking, which is very advanced in technology innovation. A lot of innovation has been happening in the last 20 years. But that also means today they are slower because the additive sort of gain from investment of every dollar is actually smaller, right? Because they don't have a burning platform. On the other end, I would see manufacturing industry, where I think a lot less technology innovation has been happening over the last 20 years. But that means that now the pace of innovation there is quite strong. So you have Internet of Things, you have augmented reality, you have AI sort of support to optimize production, and they invested little in the last 20 years, but that means that now the gain of every dollar invested there is quite high. And I would say, I personally think pharmaceuticals are somewhere in between. There was more investment in pharmaceuticals in the last 20 years than in manufacturing, but less than in banking. And also pharmaceuticals are quite similar to banking in terms of regulation, right? So you do have quite a lot of regulation that you have to comply with. And in banking, this wasn't, it was a complication, but it wasn't an inhibitor of innovation. And I'm curious to know what you think on this topic. What is the situation of pharmaceuticals in Poland versus other industries? And maybe Markus, starting with you, investments from perspective of big international pharma company, you've seen both the Polish situation and situation in some of the other European countries like France and Germany. Would you care to discuss and elaborate on your view?
So thank you very much for the question. And in fact, I think as pharmaceutical industry in Poland, we have a very particular situation because innovation is not valued at the level that it should be, from the governmental point of view and the regulatory point of view. We see the investment as a country into healthcare relatively low, by far below average in Europe, and even on the lower end of the European countries. So here our regulators are basically playing a game of trying to drive prices down rather than having innovation available for patients. And that makes it a very tough market because we do not see a stringent reimbursement of our drugs available. Many of the drugs don't even come to the market because they are price-wise outside of the possibilities of the Polish market or of what the government is willing to do. And on the other side, we have enormous delays in getting innovation on the market itself, which makes that Poland is a market which is underdeveloped in many aspects and which is really very complicated. So is obviously then also a question, how much is a company willing to invest in that country? If the return on investment is relatively low, there's not going to be a very big wish by headquarters to say, okay, we give you more. Despite the fact that it is per se, in fact, an attractive market because we have 37 million inhabitants, which is a big country for European standards. And I think the other point that you were mentioning about industry and investment in Poland is the regulatory stability, yeah, which is, you mentioned it, is very complicated for banking and for pharmaceuticals, but it goes beyond just being complicated. There's tons of changes that are happening in an irregular manner without public hearing or industry hearing, which makes it very unpredictable whether the investment that you're putting forward makes sense or not. And last not least, not to mention now the whole debate about Polexit doesn't really help to make big investors happy to invest into the country.
Okay, especially the last point, right? I think highly unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, probably we can all make a bet that Poland will remain within the EU and will be at times a bit problematic in what is being publicized. But I think more problematic for us is really the environment, the regulations environment, and the willingness of the government to invest into healthcare. Because normally it should be this market should be 3 times bigger than what it is today.
Okay, so that's an interesting view. That's even regardless of position of pharmaceutical industries versus other industries, you're saying pharmaceuticals in Poland is under sort of weight in terms of innovation, yeah, comparing to other countries. Tomasz, would you care to jump in with your opinion? So another view of multinational company.
So I think I agree with Markus when it comes to Poland that in the end, if there is no possibility to sell innovative products, then there will be no innovation. But I believe that in pharma, we must define the term of innovation, because the innovation can concern the product itself, and what we can see on the global market is connected biologic products, gene therapy, and many new areas of pharmaceutical industry, and they are also huge improvement, and especially in the last few years connected with the operational excellence of pharmaceutical companies. Let me share you with some statistics what I read about innovation, but just for example, cancer drugs. In 2015, there was 500 viable drugs for cancer treatment. Now, this year is almost 4,000 different compounds which are used. So I believe that in general, in global level, there is a huge investment in innovations, both in products and both in operational excellence, and this concerns also Poland. So I think that the surrounding is not the best for innovation in our country, but the global trends concern Poland also. So it means that we can see many effects of innovation also on the Polish market.
Great. So you see acceleration in pharma. I guess it might be related also to COVID, especially.
Yes. So if you look for the Polish companies, what I see in the newspapers or I hear on conferences, huge investment in biologics, huge investment in production. So I think that on the Polish level, we can also see that companies follow the global trend.
So falling behind EU from Markus, Tomasz, you're saying but accelerating, right? Yeah. Phil, what about your view? You have background in many companies. You worked in a startup. You led a startup. You can compare UK versus Poland as well. What do you think about position of pharmaceuticals versus other industries?
Yeah, dzień dobry. Well, first thing is, I think, I speak on behalf probably of all the pharma companies here in saying that, the one thing that's very different about this industry is the timelines for innovation that we need to work to and the risks involved. Okay, so innovation, Merck as a science and technology company, innovation is absolutely critical and core to our survival and our success. But let's remember that we're talking about, generally speaking, longer timelines and higher risks with higher barriers to entry than most other industries. Okay, and that's even just to get a product on the market. But as Marcus said, that's the beginning of the challenge, because once you've got the innovation, you then need to ensure that the innovation is available to patients. And there's lots of hurdles that we need to manage with that as well. One thing I would say is, just perhaps on a positive note, is, well, what can we do about this? Now, I think innovation, what is critical to innovation is diversity. Okay. Now, if I think about Merck as a company, we benefit a lot from being quite diverse, because yes, we have a pharmaceutical business, our healthcare business, but we also have a life science business and an electronics business. And what we see is a lot of innovation coming from the interplay between those businesses. But I think the second point is, and probably COVID has really shown us the potential of this, is the potential of collaboration. Okay, so we have lots of collaborations with other businesses, such as Pfizer and BioNTech as well, in terms of our collaboration to support the vaccine effort. But I think also what we're seeing is great potential of collaboration between public and private organizations. And I think that's where actually probably there's a significant benefit to come, not just in the early innovation process, but also in the diffusion of that innovation later. One initiative that started up in Poland very recently is the Warsaw Health Innovation Hub, which is sponsored by the Medical Research Agency in Poland. And it is a collaboration of public and private enterprise. And we're part of that collaborative. And it's quite unique within this part of Europe. And it's obviously seeking to look at ways of collaborating in order to find solutions to improve the healthcare system. So I suppose while we're all talking about barriers, there are also solutions that we can look for. And I think collaboration is one of those. But the last thing I would say, just to support the challenges we have, is, and again, it comes to the definition of innovation. Okay, innovation isn't just about people in the laboratories finding something unique and then us producing it and bringing it to the market. I think innovation is a whole system effort, all the way to actually patients enjoying the benefits of that innovation. And unfortunately, most healthcare systems, and I don't think Poland's any different, most healthcare systems are designed with efficiency and cost containment in mind, and rightly so. But there also needs to be a mechanism to really accelerate innovation, where that innovation is reimbursed, where people believe in the value of it. We need to think about mechanisms to ensure that reaches patients, and that is a cultural and structural challenge. So what I would say is, innovation isn't just about laboratories and factories. It's also about the way we work together as well.
Mm-hmm. So Phil, if I read you right, you're almost saying innovation is the sort of foundation of pharma, because of the long-term sort of view and the fact that you need to develop something far ahead.
I'm sure most industries would argue innovation is important, but I think for us, it's probably the core capability that we have.
And then you're saying we are probably thinking about it too little in terms of systemic innovation, right? So the whole environment, both internal and external, how to stimulate and support this process.
Because ultimately, if you look at, you can look at definitions of innovation, okay, but ultimately it needs to bring value, and that value needs to be in healthcare. That value needs to be realized in terms of patients treated and treated successfully.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. And Piotr, what about your opinion? So you have experience in Polish companies. You have the sort of the view of a Polish innovative companies as opposed to big multinationals, both in your current role and your previous role. You also did some sort of consulting related to innovation management process. So how do you think, what is the standing of pharmaceutical industries versus other industries?
Okay, so I'll start from my, let's say, consultant perspective. Going back to 2005, when Poland entered the European Union, and when we got an access to European grants. That was, I believe, the beginning of something very wrong what happened in Poland with those resources which were utilized at that time in, I would say, not very efficient manner. And the companies were basically funding their infrastructure, which was obvious because after long communism times and all transformation period, Polish industry, broadly speaking, was very undeveloped, if you will, or definitely needed some more investment in modern infrastructure. But why it was wrong? Because that learned people to invest into resources which they were available, but they didn't necessarily need it, or they were planning to have, but they didn't know necessarily how to use it in effective manner. So when it came late at the later stage to the second phase of granting period, where much more resources appeared for innovation, there was, I would say, the basic scene of Polish companies, which was continued from the previous period, that companies were looking for money which were funding, let's say, ideas, but not necessarily innovation. And that's why companies were focusing rather on supporting here and now, but not what is very much about innovation, also the future. Because the basic stuff and the fundamental thing about innovation in my mind is that innovation is only when it's successfully commercialized. We can talk about many different aspects, but once we skip this commercial aspect, we are only in R&D, patent stuff and stuff like this. So I would say, and why I'm saying this, because I have to refer to what Markus said. I'm a little bit surprised what Polexit, which is obviously fake news, and Markus, you should know it, regardless opinion and political opinions we have, used in some battle between political forces. What Polexit has to do with innovation in Poland. Innovation in Poland and the system we have is consequence of Poland being for a long time under communism. And the system which we are trying to adopt now in order to catch up with many undeveloped areas we had in Poland for the reasons which I mentioned. We obviously know that we are a very creative nation, and we know that there are a lot of very creative solutions coming from Poland. The system which is right now, this is not necessarily about system itself. This is more about that in Western Europe, people and companies and business learned about innovation and what is innovation much earlier. Development of awareness, what it means to be innovative, started in the 80s, 70s. We started talking about innovation, let's say 10 years ago. Look at Polish schools, historically and now. Did we have the topic in Polish schools like innovation? That was maybe half of lesson in any technology or some other aspect topic, which mentioned innovation, probably basically with having in mind product innovation, very often related to patent. Polish managers are learning what innovation is. And referring to, I think, to Phil said, is innovation, this is another fundamental thing, is an attitude. This is the whole process. This is the element of company culture. This is the element of financing, IP controlling, commercialization, as we mentioned. The whole process which includes R&D. This is a very important thing, like being ready to fail, which is in Polish culture difficult to assess, because again, we are a proud nation and we want to win. So also coming from perspective of corporations, pay attention that there is different thing on the headquarters, if you will, level, how the strategy is created, and there is different thing how you execute it on the country levels. It is obvious that country managers are responsible for delivering targets. The year starts 1st of January, and the year, and for many companies and managers, the world ends in the 31st of December. So here you have to balance many different things. So at the end, implementation, and I would to stress very strongly, implementation and commercialization of innovation is something which is critical. And very, very shortly at the end, to summarize, if I look at and pharmaceutical industry, there are tons of aspects, like in many industries, why innovation works or why not. Critical always will be in product innovation, that's for sure, because this is what we expect for pharma companies. And access to resources, mainly financial resources, and access to world of science, to scientists who cooperate with us as a pharma industry. If we are able, as a pharmaceutical managers, are able to combine these three elements, then all the others is a consequence of what we are able to create using financial resources with our strategy and brain power we can acquire from outside science world. And this is something which has to be improved in Poland, because very often this cooperation between business and science is, I would say, well, not perfect, if you will, delicately saying. And the reason why it is really, this is, again, we have to go back historically, how the education system was created in Poland, how high school system and university system was created, what and why Polish scientists were granted for and awarded for in their work, and so on and so on. So this is something which requires long time and still a lot of effort from everybody in order to really fix the innovation system in Poland, also in pharma.
Fantastic. Piotr, thank you for that. So you're saying it's not that much of a discussion, pharmaceuticals versus other industries, but it's more of a discussion, Polish mentality and historical sort of background and legacy that impacts our thinking today. Before moving on to Paweł, Marcus, do you want to answer the point about, you know, fake news and that it doesn't impact the innovation? I think your view is
I was thinking whether or not, in fact, I wanted to not comment on that, but now that you ask, because I think it's really not the big topic, but it is a topic somehow. You know, I'm the president of the Polish-German Chamber of Commerce by coincidence, and I'm getting these questions, yeah, from investors, big investors from Germany, who say, what is really behind this? Is it really sensible to invest in Poland? I mean, there's other countries around as well. The same applies also to the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, my boss has Poland on his agenda there somewhere on his screen. It's there. What's happening there? Yeah, all these news is not good news. Yeah, but I think we shouldn't put our debate on that, because in reality we want to talk about innovation and innovation. And here I do agree with Piotr. Poland is a good basis for innovation because we have smart people here in this country. We have really smart people, and they come up with cool stuff. If I look at the whole IT development that we see here in Poland, really admirable. Yeah, and we have talents that go an extra mile that we do not possibly see in the same amount in other countries. Yeah, so that's really a very cool thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, if I'm just might add, first of all, when I was back in the UK and and Brexit actually happened. I wish it was fake news, but anyway, that's another subject. What I would say as well, what I see in Poland is real hunger, and actually, that is very, very important to drive innovation. There's a real hunger, and just coming back to what Piotr said, it comes from pride of the nation, and I think that should be harnessed, and we should support that. But we need to think about what the right processes and support we need to put in place to really make that flourish. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Piotr. Paweł, so over to you, and you have an interesting perspective as well, both from perspective of business and the scientific world, right? As a lecturer in Wrocław Medical University.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for invitation for this panel. It is very interesting discussion because as I'm a lecturer at the university, as you said, I see a lot of scientists, wonderful scientists with different point of view, with wonderful ideas, but there are a lot of limitations here in Poland. And if we don't know what it's about, it is always about the money. For me, as I'm a co-founder of startup, one of the 3 co-founders of startup, it's me always. It is about the money and timeline. We are crushing as a startup with lack of money and lack of time. In case of regulatory process, in case of decisions in meetings and in talks with big pharma. Big pharma is our customer because we are developing a solution as a platform solution. We are developing a transdermal carrier which can transport large molecules such as peptides through the skin without irritation. So patients can skip traditional therapies. It can skip taking pills in cases to take a patch, for example. And we can incorporate every molecule you can imagine. We proved that. But as we are in talks with big pharma, the decision making in big pharma crushes us because it takes too much time for us as a startup. So cooperation with big pharma don't works very well. We have great solution. The answer from big pharma is that we have great solution. We understand, but we have to check in our legal department and other departments. And we are running out of money and running out of time. The second thing is, once more, about the money. As we can afford drug discovery phase, preclinical phase, we can't reach here in Poland. We can't reach phase 1 of clinical trials by ourselves. So we are always asking big pharma to join us in this process so we can do it together. And again, preparing a decision in big pharma takes too much time. So it's always, for me, it's always about the money. The second thing, as Marcus said, is place of residence. I give you an example, one of the worst examples, I think, that happened to me. I talked with chief of R&D. He asked me where I'm from. I'm from Poland. Oh, from where? It's the middle of nowhere, biotechnological, the middle of nowhere. And if you don't have in your team one of the Harvard graduate, I won't talk with you. So it was really unpleasant, but it happens. It happens.
His loss.
But still, I can see increase of the innovation processes. It is very good, but still lack of the money and lack of the time. In case of EU grants, EU programs, they're only for 2 years. for 3 years. For pharma industry, 2 or 3 years is not is insufficient. It's insufficient to move from drug discovery to even to finish the preclinical trial.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can just comment on that, Pavel. So I totally empathize with your situation, having run a startup myself. And what I would say is, big pharma, just like the healthcare system, okay, big organizations, just by their nature, are geared towards efficiency and productivity, okay? And sometimes that's a difficult environment within which to innovate. And that's why I think big organizations actually purposefully need to think about how they drive innovation, okay? So, for instance, in the case of Merck, we have a specific innovation center in Germany that is totally designed to supporting startups, both with venture capital, but also with expertise and process around how you commercialize. And sometimes, the outputs of those, we don't commercialize. But we realize that you need to invest in that, and you need to do it with a separate part of your organization that is not designed to think a certain way. Yeah. And for the same reason, I think in the healthcare system, the healthcare system needs to put in place mechanisms to drive innovation specifically, and they need to think about that as a separate, almost a separate challenge that they have, not just cost containment.
Fantastic.
Exactly, correct. I agree.
To what he said and what Pavel said, I experienced that environment of startups or of innovative groups and corporations, they are speaking different language. Sometimes you need somebody who helps somehow translate what other part understands. The slow motion of corporations, which is obvious from one side because they are huge organizations and it can't be avoided. Sometimes impatience from startups' point of view, they are not meeting in the right moment, in the right time. That's why this is also a process of education. Like you said, you have center for this. You understood the importance of creating something which goes towards innovative companies and helps to shorten this, I would say, distance between them. But there's also one other aspect. I don't know how it is in other countries. I believe it is better than in Poland. But there is something like understanding to intellectual property within the process. Because if cooperation of pharmaceutical industry or any industry with world of science is something relatively new in this modern way as we experience or we want to experience today, then it means the approach and understanding of who has rights and how can benefit from IP is also different and has to be developed. It needs time. Because, of course, everybody wants to have as much benefits as possible from one side, especially those innovators. From the other side, those who are going to commercialize, they are not interested in giving rights to innovators because they want to have as much benefits and profits from this innovation as possible. So this is something which also is particularly in Poland, but I don't know how it is in other countries. This is what I observed.
Okay.
So I agree, and it's about risk sharing. Yeah. So it's about having the right attitude to risk and acceptance that there's risk on both sides, and IP is the mechanism through which you do that.
Fantastic. I think it's a really strong sort of discussion in terms of content and specific points. So just to summarize what I hear, right? Marcus, you're saying, yes, pharmaceuticals in Poland lags behind EU. Tomasz, you're saying, but it's accelerating. Phil, you're saying, let's remember that it's at the core. Piotr, for you, it's more of a culture thing in Poland than, talking about pharmaceuticals versus other industries. Pavel, your take that cooperation between science world and the big pharma is actually not that good. And then I really like your point that big corporations sometimes forget that innovation at the very core is again something new. So it cannot be within the standard processes. You have to have a cell outside, right, to make this work. And really strong emphasis on commercialization, Piotr, that you took to the table. So really
the only thing I'd add, Pavel, is collaboration. I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah. This is a key word, collaboration.
The point is just that collaboration is really extremely complicated to put in place. Yeah, as Phil was just saying, you have your specific organization in Germany. We also have the same. Yeah, we have, but you know that it's in our case it's grants for ups. Yeah, so anybody can apply to participate. It can be a Polish company, can be a Hungarian company, German, whatever. Yeah, and so we have a multitude of these. So I guess it's pretty much the same what Phil is saying. The problem is the place is limited. The amount of investment is also limited. Yeah, so we have to take a choice and then build the innovation together with these companies. And obviously, IP is playing a big role there. That's important for everybody, both us as well as these companies. And we then have to see how it moves forward. I may want to perhaps give it a different spin, because what Phil and I were referring to is these German examples, which is not Poland. Yeah, we have just announced a couple of months ago that we will be putting our ITD hub here to Poland. Yeah, IT development hub and innovation hub will employ some like 400 or 500 IT specialists in Poland, because we believe that in Poland we have the right talent. Yeah, we have these people who go the extra mile and who are going to deliver really innovative stuff. So we will invent here in Poland stuff that doesn't exist yet for the pharmaceutical market or for the healthcare market. And not only for that, because we are also, like in Merck's case, a multi-divisional company, and we will also develop stuff for crop science, for example.
That's fantastic. I was going to propose that we sort of merge the second and third block of that I wanted to cover into one, because
time is running away.
Time is running away, and we have such a rich discussion. So Marcus, you sort of swiftly moved on to technology enablement, and I understand that this center deals with AI most and foremost. So this is super, as I understood from our discussion earlier. So super interesting topic also for me personally. Tomasz, you wanted to mention something. I don't know if still on the previous block, if we can maybe move over to technology and innovation in your companies, examples.
So what I wanted to say in connection with the previous point, but it's also connected with the information and technology, that in my opinion, and maybe you agree with me, pharma business is a very conservative business, because we have very innovative products, but as an industry, it is very conservative because of the regulation and because of the quality requirements and ability or willingness to take low risk. This is the reason. So I had always the feeling that in pharma industry we adopt new technologies later than other industries because of this conservatism what we have in our business.
So Marcus, just digging deeper on your point. So I'm super strong technology enthusiast. AI close to my heart. That's cloud, fantastic. You're saying opening center in Poland. I think Google announced a few days ago that they are opening the biggest cloud R&D center in Europe in Warsaw. So 16 floors of a skyscraper, 20,000 square meters, hundreds of engineers. So fantastic. But I know that, Pavel, you were a bit skeptical when we discussed, technology enablement. I think you mentioned, but sometimes we sort of go over the top. We push AI everywhere, and actually maybe traditional methods are more successful in certain places.
Yes, I'm skeptic, but not totally, because In pharma industry, in science, we have a lot of data, numerous relations between different factors. So it drives us towards AI. It's normal way, but definitely this is good for drug discovery for me. But we always crash after, not crash, but we have to reach this in vivo studies. And this is crucial for pharma. This is crucial. In vivo data, in preclinical trials, in clinical trials. And as I'm a scientist, I can see differences between all those things that are calculated and designed, even using AI, then in next phases of studies, we are seeing that these results are not reaching the same point.
But if I understand,
yeah, please.
If I understand correctly, we are talking more about R&D phase in innovation, because if we observe situation with COVID and the amount of data which was collected during pandemic, do you believe we as world citizens, that scientists, as those who are really working on solutions in COVID area, do they have access to the proper information? Is this information globally properly managed? So at the end, those who have access to certain information, they can use different approach and different methodology within certain phase of innovation process, which is this research and development. And that's why very often it is not so easy, maybe even to convince investors to invest into your research, because simply very often we go and do shortcuts.
Okay, and Phil, what about sort of technology in your company? So as you mentioned at the beginning, Merck is not just sort of medicine production company. It's not pure pharmaceuticals, but also life sciences, electronics. That sort of is a great area for innovation, for creating additional sort of, I don't know, apps on your mobile to support consumption of medications, when to take it, what to do, what to eat, etc. So,
I think well, there's probably 4 areas where we're interested in, and the first one I'd bring back to healthcare, which is the whole field of biotechnology. We've talked a lot about digital here, but let's remember that innovation is accelerating at a pace in biotechnology, and obviously the mRNA solution was a very public example of that. But biotechnology for sure is going to lead to more specialized, personalized medicine. Merck, we're really focused on being a global specialty innovator in those areas. And also supported by our life science business, which supports many other businesses with things like CRISPR technology, etc. So biotechnology is obviously a massive drive, and we're going to see accelerating innovation there. On the data side of things, you're right that our electronics business gives us a different perspective on things, and obviously next generation chips are extremely important, because that's going to drive quantum computing. We're one of the world's largest producers of semiconductors, and that's going to be a huge, if you like, area of investment and innovation, which perhaps is behind the background of these things. We've talked about AI and next generation coding, extremely important, because there's probably, even within the library of molecules that we've already developed, further innovation just by understanding the data better, and clearly that's an area that we're interested in, is saying, look, how can we really harvest the innovations that have already been produced just by understanding the effect when we look at big data. Okay, but I think the fourth area is, we've heard a lot about wearable technology and the human machine interface. That is going to produce even more data, which will lead to even more innovation. And that again is a key area for us in terms of how can we really generate quality data about the effectiveness of medicines, but also the progress of patients, and feed that back into our innovation process.
I'd like to add something as a scientist and scientific point of view. I totally agree with you, Phil. But sometimes I think that we are missing something, that we have a solution in our hand, because all about all these drug banks in big pharma, we have the molecules that works, but we are not using them because bioavailability, because of the solubility. And sometimes we can step back and think how to improve those things, how to improve bioavailability. And sometimes for me, it is much easier. It is easier to go that way. That I have working acting molecule. Why not to change bioavailability? Why not to change?
I totally agree, and I think that's where we'll probably see significant innovation coming from alternative use of existing molecules. When we understand it at a big data level.
I do agree with you, Phil, and this is a trend that we have observed in the past so often. For me, I think one of the key topics, direction future, is the merge of pure pharmaceuticals with data. Creating an environment where we accompany the patient along his patient journey, and where we allow the doctor to take better charge of the patient. Which is for sure going to be one of these major steps to get diseases better under control. We are, for example, collaborating with a startup in diabetes care, One Drop, and we've just kicked this off commercially, where really patients are getting services that they didn't have before, where they can monitor better their disease, where they can get clearer indications when to take which drug, when to do what in order to stay healthy. So these kind of things, I think they will come more and more. And I know from my talks here in Poland, there is a number of very interesting startups around in Poland that are in very similar situations, perhaps not so much in diabetes, but in cardiovascular, for example. Really cool stuff coming up. And this will, as you say, generate a drive with more data available, more possibilities to link all of this. However, obviously, data privacy plays a major role, and this is often something where startups are struggling with, because there is too many regulations to be looked at. But I think Tomasz, you had,
over to Tomasz. I think we are slowly running out of time, and we still have two questions in the chat, so I would like to maybe try to cover them. So Tomasz, you wanted to mention something?
Referring to Marcus said, I read a very interesting case, and this is a case in Australia where treatment of diabetes is around $1 billion yearly. So the Australian health provider gets information from different areas using clouding technologies, and for example, retail stores. So clothing, for example, chocolate selling, and so forth, because they know that the main reason of diabetes is overweight. So they try to find data about trends in the country where overweighting as a problem occurs, and in that area to act in order to prevent the illness. So I think in pharmaceutical business and in entire healthcare business, using data from different areas all around will be the future. And slowly, and the COVID as a pandemic, it fastened it up a bit, but as a trend, I believe that it will continue, and more data from different areas of our life will be collected for the industry. Thank you.
Fantastic. So if I'm hearing you well, digital is great. It creates more opportunities to communicate with the patients, especially to map fully end-to-end patient journey, gather more data. And I think quite a few of you said data is the future. I think Piotr, you were mentioning, yes, but if it's democratized appropriately, right? If everyone has access to it, if
available, simply available, you know,
available.
The amount that allows really complex analysis.
Yeah, and I think the Pavel, you were sort of saying softening, right? So you also see great sort of enabling factor in technology, but sometimes let's not overdo it. Let's come back to the basics. Yeah. Do we have a molecule that already works, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Digital is one thing, but it's all about, you know, biotech. It's all about the new technologies, new molecules in pharmaceuticals. Technology is just a mean to get to those molecules, right? So
correct.
So fantastic. We have two questions if we still have time. I think one of the questions was, we were talking about Polish position versus other countries. I think Ineza was asking, okay, but what country would you give as the sort of best innovation in pharmaceuticals example? I don't know if anyone volunteers, maybe Phil, Marcus.
Yeah, it depends what part of innovation, but I would say you have to recognize Israel has, I think the statistic is per head of population, they have the most startups worldwide, and they've got a very productive biotech industry as well. However, what is interesting is they innovate a lot, but what they do is they're masters at then selling on their innovation to bigger companies to then commercialize. So I think they're very good at focusing on what they're good at, and then how to commercialize it by using, again, collaborations.
Fantastic. Yeah,
I would coincide. Israel is for sure a very hot place to be in innovation, but I think we also have to mention the United States, where science and industry are really working very well together, all the way with startups in digital. And that's quite a good role model, I must say, despite the fact that it's not European. And it's a bit of pity that I couldn't say any of our European countries is so much better. But really, these two countries, from my perspective, make innovation really get on ground quickly.
Fantastic, thank you. And final question from Ivona. We were talking about, you know, innovation in Poland. On one hand, culture is maybe less pro-innovation. On the other, we do have quite a lot of innovations. And the question is, you know, what are the changes that we would have to go through to enable innovation better? So one, maybe adopt more of a accept failure culture that Piotr, you were talking about. But what else? Are there any other big inhibitors? I think
just
regulation.
One word is venture capital. We need more capital available. Yeah, and I don't think that Poland can wait for big pharma companies coming into Poland and looking for startups in Poland, for the reasons mentioned at the very beginning. I would rather think it would be super if we would be able to get more venture capital available here from local local people and organizations, and that could give it really a big push forward. And by the way, there is, but it should be more.
Fantastic. So because we mentioned culture challenges, regulation, capital availability, venture capital funds. Piotr, do you want to add anything?
There are many things. I will answer or comment to this aspect in the following, a little bit coming back to Israel. Look how the country is organized, and for example, how what role army plays in development of young people. They are learning there a lot. Imagine there is a group of people who are going to the army because they have to, but they are not going to fight. because for different reasons, they are capable for doing different things. Army is offering them development. And a lot of creative ideas or mindset, if you will, is created on Army level. And this is, again, coming back to system. We have to analyze many different systems. Let's look at what those most innovative countries work the best, and work on today, but also on future generations to really change. Because if we talk about being more innovative, we are talking about cultural aspects. Yes, it is important, but at the end, it is not giving a proper effect if it's not put into proper system. And the system is like company culture created over decades and over generations. So we are not going to be innovative tomorrow, the next day, maybe in 10, 20, 30 years. Here we need long-term strategy and long-term approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. We are beginners. We are building a structure. We are starting to build a structure, but we have to found a founds. And also agree with you, Marcus. I can see the increased level of venture capital, which want to invest in biotech, but still not enough. Still not enough.
Fantastic. So institutional sort of support and long-term strategy is another big topic, and I fully agree with the Israeli example. One of my team members was from Israel, and the interesting thing is when he was joining the job market at the age of 21, 22, he was already an experienced team leader of a software engineering team for like 6-7 years, right? And yes, you have this additional experience, but also it comes in early, so it adopts and molds your mentality early on, right? How to approach engineering problems. So really cool example, and thank you for that. I think we ran out of time, so
okay.
Until organizers don't interrupt us, I'm happy to talk further.
Yeah, I would just add, I think there's something that Israel and Poland have in common, and it comes back to what I said earlier about hunger. I think that is really important because, you know, yes, the army has a massive impact in Israel, but also there's a real drive from the top right the way down. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of leadership in Poland and people painting a vision of the future and really, you know, bringing people together around this, you know, drive to take Poland where it should be.
I think that one more comment that we could make there is that Poland, because of the structure that the country has as employer structure, is full of entrepreneurs. Yeah, so we have a lot of people who have this entrepreneurial thinking. What do I do if this or that happens? Yeah, do it yourself, do it quickly, etc. So that really helps a lot. But I think Poland really needs to work also on how to position itself in the European context so that it can drive more attraction to here.
Fantastic. I think,
gentlemen, we have the last 2 minutes, and I see 2 questions in the chat. So maybe Paweł, you can manage.
We have covered them. We have covered them. We
okay.
So
we have 2 minutes.
Tomasz.
If you allow me one comment on innovation, but I think it's innovation. We are forced to be innovative in Eastern Europe. So I think that in the last 20 years, a huge economical development was connected with the cheap workforce but with a big market. Now the living standards are quite high, so companies are forced to compete with international other companies from Western Europe or all over the world, not having the advantage of low costs because they went up. So I think that in the long run, the innovation in any areas of economical life will be very important and will be necessary to survive for the future.
Fantastic. So we basically said, look, Israel is an example of where most startups sort of thrive, and it's all about the spirit, but also commercialization focus. US, you know, strong cooperation, science, and business. in terms of what to change: more capital, less regulation, adopt the culture to accept failure, and maybe have some more institutional long-term strategy support. But also, let's not forget the strong sides of what we have to build with in Poland. So the hunger, Phil, that you mentioned, the entrepreneurship, and I think, Tomasz, I read your point that actually the market will force us to move from cost competition to innovation competition anyway. So that sounds optimistic, actually. So, gentlemen, massive thanks for this. I think it was I enjoyed the discussion very much. Thank you for this. And Grzegorz, over to you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Just one comment from my side: we need more women in the discussion. But it was great to hear your conversation. Thank you very much. Have a good day to everyone, and we will switch for another topic on our conference. Thank you very much. Cheers.